everyone, it's Jen. Welcome back to Bookish Blonde. So today for you, I have a video and I'm calling it Jumpstart January. So for the year of 2025, I thought it would be fun for me to come up with some kind of recommendation video for you based upon a monthly theme. So for January, I thought it would be fun to do Jumpstart January. So these books I'm going to talk about are all books, debut books by authors. These debut books are ones that blew my mind, made me think, I can't believe that was a debut novel by this author. It was so good for, whatever reason. So I'm going to talk to you about these. Some of them you might have heard about on this channel already, depending on how long you've been around my channel. But these are just ones that really just stuck out to me. And I thought, fresh month, fresh start to a new year. Let's talk about debut novels. So let's just get started. These are in no particular order. I will try my best not to sound like a broken record because obviously, I gave all of these 5 stars. I loved all of these. I recommend all of these. So let's just get started. So the first one I actually don't own physically. I read it in 2016, I think, but it was released in 2011, and that is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. So I read this one from my library. I read this back when I lived in California, so it's been a long time, but it still stands out to me as one of my favorite books that I've read of all time. I would love to reread it at some point. And this one takes place in 19th century London. We have a fantasy filled with romance and magic. I gave it 5 stars, like I said. It has over 1 million ratings on Goodreads. I think it's a 4.01 average on Goodreads, which is high when you have over a million ratings. But I gave this one a 5 star. So this one, we're following a pop-up circus that only shows up at night. And within the circus, there is this ongoing game that will only end when one person dies. So we have 2 very older magicians that have, for the purpose of this game, been grooming or preparing young magicians since childhood. So the 2 magicians we're following are Cecilia and Marco. So they end up falling in love, which isn't a spoiler, but it doesn't matter. They still have to play this magical game during this circus setting. I got so lost in this book. I really felt swept away by the story. I felt like I read this book with all of my senses, if that makes sense. It was a very intricate storyline, very atmospheric, like I said. The prose in this was just so rich and satisfying to me, and I was just hooked and could not put this down, and I was fully invested. And if you haven't heard of this book or picked it up, I highly recommend it. I have not read anything else by Erin Morgenstern, if I'm saying her name right, but I would like to at some point. But this was just one of those books that was just, I felt was written for me, and I felt fully engrossed in it, and I loved every minute of this atmospheric book. Okay, next one is The Quiet Tenant by, I might butcher this, Clemence Michelon. This is also a debut. I read this the year it came out. Was it 23? Let's see. Yeah, in 2023. And so this one, it takes place in upstate New York. We are following a couple main characters, but a main character, I wrote down notes since I read this over, a year ago to make sure I don't spoil anything. What is his name? The main guy. Aiden Thomas. So Aiden Thomas is your neighbor that will help you shovel your snow off your driveway. He is a hard worker. He is loved by people in his community. Very hardworking family man. He has a 13-year-old daughter, but he's also a serial killer. So he kidnaps women, and he's a serial killer. And you pick up with Rachel, who's his most recent victim, and he hides her captive in the backyard. His 13-year-old daughter has no idea about her or the fact that her dad's a serial killer. She has been kept in captivity for about 5 years, and then they have to move. So he decides when he moves with his daughter, to have Rachel be undercover in the sense of like she's a family member that's living with them right now because she needs help. But that's not true. So we're getting 3 different perspectives. We're getting Cecilia, who's a 13-year-old daughter. We're getting Rachel, who is being kept in captivity right now. And then we are following a girl named Emily. Emily works at a local restaurant to this new place where they lived, and she kind of falls in love with him. So obviously you have a psychological thriller, you have serial killer vibes, you have trauma in here, survival, power dynamics, all of these things that make this debut such a memorable, captivating one. I could not put this one down. And I read a lot of mystery thrillers, which you guys know, and I was very impressed with this. And I had that thought, I can't believe this was a debut. So I'm anxious for her to come out with a new one. I think there's one maybe coming out in 2025, like in the summer, possibly. I'm not sure, but definitely keeping my eye out for more by this author. Okay, next one up is The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. This is, again, obviously a debut. Her second book was not for me. I was very disappointed in her second book, but this one absolutely blew me away. I read this, I believe, in 23. I think it came out in 21, where it takes place in 1700s London, and then there's a timeline that's present day. And in the past timeline, we have Nella, who oversees this apothecary, and she develops poisons to give to women to help get rid of men that are treating them horribly in their life. In this timeline, she makes a friend out of Eliza, who's a 12-year-old girl, and that storyline takes place. There's a register of all these women that she has helped, and so that comes under scrutiny, and that may release some of these, there's a threat that maybe this book will be exposed and Nella will get in trouble, basically. And then in present day, we're following Caroline, who finds a magical bottle, or an old bottle, apothecary bottle, in a river as she's grieving the loss of her marriage. Her husband cheats on her around their 10-year wedding anniversary. And so an investigation starts. She starts looking into the history of this bottle, which brings her the 2 timelines together. The historical, mysterious setting was really what sold me on this, on top of loving the characters. The pacing was good. I felt very connected to the writing and the characters, all of it. And the way these 2 stories, these 2 timelines weave together were just, I loved it. I thought it was just brilliant. I thought it was magical how these 2 timelines came together. Very impressive. Very impressed with the writing and the story and the intricacy of all of it, and it just was so good. So there's that debut. Next one, this debut was 2010. I think I read it in 16 or 17, so it's been a while since I've read it. And that is Still Missing by Chevy Stevens. I originally got this from my library, and after I read this one, I immediately checked out everything that my library had by this author, and I think I've read her entire backlist. I'm waiting for a new book by her. I have loved almost everything that she has written. But, this is her debut novel. Another one where I was just so impressed by the story, the twist, how dark this book was, and how engaged and, engaged and invested I was in this story. So we're following Annie Sullivan. She is a 32-year-old realtor who's showing a home. She gets abducted. She's held captive for, I think, around a year by a psychopath in a remote mountain cabin. And so this story unfolds through 2 different kind of lenses. The first lens is she is unfolding about the story about her captivity and the thoughts that what that did to her with her therapist. So you're getting the back timeline that way. Then you also are getting a timeline or a perspective where it takes place after her escape from this this person, and she's struggling to get her life back together. You also have the police going on trying to figure out who this guy was and to catch him. But this was such a raw and disturbing thriller, but it was also honest as well. I felt a lot of different emotions reading this book. I felt like I was being shocked all the way through as far as the twist, the storyline, what she went through. Like I said, how dark it was. Like, I loved reading this, but I felt bad for loving it because it was so kind of messed up and twisted. Yeah. So again, just another debut that shocked me. Highly recommend if you haven't checked out Chevy Stevens. There's only been one book by her I did not love, and that was something Roads, Dark Roads or something like that. I'll pop it here if I can not remember, but I'll look that up. But yeah, Chevy Stevens, she's definitely an author to check out if you like mystery thrillers. Okay, next one, Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. This is another one that I love the debut. Her second book I read was just okay. I didn't love it as much, but this one blew me away. This is at the heart, it's a courtroom thriller, but I was just so impressed by how this courtroom thriller brought in so many different aspects, so many different feelings, from the plot being interesting, from the multiple POVs being interesting. This is another case of, like, I was just blown away about how this story, how the pieces and POVs move together to create such an impactful book, impactful ending, and such a page-turning ride along the way. It takes place in rural, I hate that word, rural Virginia. And we have this experimental device called a miracle submarine that's like a pressurized oxygen situation chamber thing. And it's supposed to provide therapeutic properties for people. It explodes and 2 people die. That's all in the jacket cover, so I'm not spoiling it. We have a mom who has a child. She's desperate for some help to get some of these like therapeutic interventions for her son with autism. Autism. Yes. And then we have a doctor who thinks and hopes this chamber will help save his marriage by curing him of his infertility issues. And what was the other one? There is an Korean immigrant that came to the United States hoping that this will help her daughter heal with her issues as well. So the secrets that are revealed throughout this story just were so good. They were so good. It was so captivating. I had another case of just such a wide variety spectrum of all the emotions and feelings while reading this book. It's also a good study of grief in a lot of ways. You also have that whodunit. You have the, captivating courtroom situation. Very riveting plot. And this one just left me with the feels of like being thankful for what you do have, living in the moment each day, and just appreciating each day because you don't know what could happen tomorrow. The timelines and the way this story built up to the conclusion was just another brilliant case of brilliant writing, without saying brilliant 400 times. Anyways, there's that one. Miracle Creek, Angie Kim. There you have it. Heard it here first. No, I'm kidding. Okay, this next one is First Lie Wins, Ashley Elston. This is the last one I have here in this pile physically for you today. This is just was such a unique thriller. We have a con woman named Evie. You don't really know her real name. She's a very tough, smart protagonist. This was a fun thriller. It was twisty, action-packed. We have morally gray characters, which I love. But this is a case of she is on a target, living this personality, conning this man. She's taking instructions from her boss, who is also a mystery, who this boss is, who is his real identity. And in the process of this, she meets a woman, and she has Evie's original birth name. And so that sends Evie through a total rabbit hole of what is happening, who is who can I trust, who can I not trust. And this one just blew me away for how unique it was, and I was thoroughly engaged and very impressed with the writing and the twists and turns this plot had for being a debut. So that one made the list. Okay, I have 3 more to talk about. I don't own these books. I would like to have them on my shelves one day, but Caitlin Wearer, I don't know if I'm saying that name right, but that's The Damage. It was debuted in 21. I read it in 2021. This one, we have 2 brothers, Tony and Nick. Tony's a very protective older brother. Something horrible happens to Nick. He ends up being in a situation where he's sexually assaulted and he's beat up, he's battered and bruised, and he's in the hospital. Tony gets very protective over his brother and wants to figure out what happened, put this person away that did this to his brother. Tony's wife is a lawyer, very smart female lawyer that is able to take the feelings out of this and try to get justice for her brother-in-law. And then you also have the perspective of the cop in here as well that is, looking at this investigation. The person that did this to Nick is now out on bail, I believe. Things, as they're trying to be fixed and justice trying to be served, things get a little bit out of control. The complex, realistic characters and realistic plot, this is a book that I'm not saying it can happen. I'm sure it has happened somewhere. I felt like I was reading a true crime book almost. Such a realistic portrayal of all the feels that go into something happening when something like this happens to someone, how it affects so many different people in that person's life. The relational / family dynamics in this one just really intrigued me and blew me away. You have 2 timelines in this, 2015 and 2019. Both were equally provocative and engaging. Very well written, very intense storyline. Tony's desire for revenge, the older brother, was just so visceral. I couldn't get enough of it. And there were twists in this book that I wasn't expecting. So even though this is more like a thriller at its heart, because you're trying to figure out, get justice, all of that, the relational family part of it was just something else entirely and so captivating. And I was very impressed. Very impressed. Okay, let's see. 2 more. Wayward. I won't go into too much detail. This is by Amelia Hart. I love this book, and there's another one coming out by her. So excited. We have 3 timelines, a bunch of witchy / magic realism, historical fiction vibes in this one. We have strong female characters that are connected to the natural world in one way or another. So we have 2019, we have Kate, who's fleeing London, and her husband that is just controlling into her aunt's cottage. She finds out her aunt has some secrets. 1619, we're following Altha, I think that's how you pronounce it. She is being accused of witchcraft, awaiting trial for a local farmer who has been murdered. And then we have 1942, which is World War II timeline, and we're following Violet, who is kind of stuck at home for different reasons, and she finds a locket with the initial W on her locket in her bedroom. This novel was, again, another case of the plot and the storyline was so brilliant to me. The fact that someone could think of this and how everything weaves together just is so impressive. I would say, this is probably fair to say, this is the most well-written, my favorite multiple POV book I've ever read to date. The female resilience in this was amazing. The way, again, just such a masterpiece of how these 3 storylines weave together. Just is the number one multiple POV timeline book I think I've ever read. So pick that one up. Last one I have for you today to talk about is Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. This debuted in 24. I read it in 24. Actually, this is not a debut novel by this author. So let me take that back. This is the adult debut book by this author, but it was so good that I wanted to put on this list. So it debuted in 24. I read it in 24. Actually listened to it on audio from my library. But we have Lucy, who's best friends with Savvy growing up. Something happens. Lucy is found wandering the neighborhood or her small town covered in Savvy's blood. The whole town is convinced that she's done this murder, that she's murdered her best friend. She doesn't have any memory of doing that or of the night in general. So she moves to LA. You fast forward, we meet Ben, who is a true crime podcaster. And the podcast element of this audiobook was so good. It was so good. It felt like a real podcast. So he picks up her story. He convinces her to go back home and try to figure out what happened to Savvy, even if it ends up being that she murdered her. This was a brilliant, twisty debut novel or adult debut novel with dark, dry humor that I was obsessed with. The plot kept me guessing. I did not want to stop. I found myself finding chores to do around the house so I could keep listening to this audiobook and not be interrupted. And I loved... Lucy had a grandmother in this story. I loved her spunky character. She was one of my favorite characters I read that year. I don't think I really talked about her too much in my best of or anything of 2024, but her character made me laugh out loud, and I just want to be best friends with this grandma. She was amazing. So overall, again, just blew my mind. So there you have it. Those are some Jumpstart January debut books by authors that were just had my jaw to the floor as far as I cannot believe this was a debut, whether it be the writing, the plot, the characters, my reading experience, all of it. They were so good. So I hope this gets you to pick one of these up. It's making me want to reread The Night Circus, if I'm being honest. So I might give that some thought for this year and see if I still feel the same way because I read that so long ago. But yeah, what are you guys reading? How is January going for you guys? I hope you're enjoying what you're reading. I'm having a very strong reading month so far. Spoiler alert. I can't wait to wrap up January and tell you guys my thoughts on some of these books that I've been enjoying. And I'll see you in my next video. Happy reading, guys. Thanks. Bye.